the cult that believed pain was language and spoke only through screams. They called themselves the Lingua Sanguis, the blood tongue. You wouldn't find them in any books, not even in the rare corners of forbidden archives. They didn't write, they didn't speak, they screamed. It began with a whisper from the caves in the north, a place few dared enter. Legend had it that sound traveled differently there. Screams echoed too long, and silence bled into your bones. A group of outcasts made the caves their home, claiming the world above had lied to them. Words, they said, were a prison. Language diluted truth. Only pain was pure. Only agony spoke without filter. They believed the body could form syntax through suffering. A shriek could be a greeting, a sob, a story, a guttural wail, a confession. Every nerve ending was a syllable, every scar, a scripture, and they became fluent. The cult began small, but grew like a virus in silence. They recruited those broken by the world, or those too curious to stay away. Artists came, seeking new expressions. Philosophers came, intrigued by the rawness of the idea. And others came to be heard, truly heard, in a language no lie could survive. Once inside, you had to surrender your tongue. Quite literally. The initiation required the cutting of the tongue, often done by the high listener herself. A woman known only by the sound she made when she birthed her son through fire and broken glass. No one knew her real name. They only knew her by that scream, recorded into stone by gouging the rhythm into cave walls with her teeth. The ceremonies were not held at night or during the day. They followed pain cycles. Every 27 hours, a different chamber of the cave would become the auditorium, where members would perform conversations by exposing their bodies to flames, needles, and shards of sharpened bone. It was not torture, not to them. It was dialogue. Children were born into the cult, never taught to speak. Instead, they learned to respond, not with words, but with gasps and howls. A pinprick would elicit a certain whimper, a burn, a high-pitched yelp that meant, "I understand." As they grew, their expressions became more complex. By age 7, they could communicate entire poems through joint dislocation. Visitors, if ever allowed in, left either changed or missing. Some went mad trying to decipher the screaming grammar. Others begged to stay, to unlearn speech and rewire their souls. There was one man, a linguist named Everbray, who dared to study them. He believed he could transcribe their screams into something structured. For 8 months, he lived among them, watching, listening, never speaking. He began mapping sound to emotions, matching pitches to wounds. But the cult did not approve. They said he was tainting their purity, that by writing their language, he was lying. They did not kill him. They let him scream. They broke every finger, every joint, every rib. Not out of rage, but to teach him. For weeks, he screamed with meaning he didn't understand. By the end, he was speaking back. His final scream, the one he uttered as they cut out his eyes and ears, was said to be the most articulate sentence ever spoken by an outsider. That scream still echoes in the northern cave, looping infinitely in the stone, never fading. Some say it says, "I understand now." Others claim it says, "There is no going back." Those who leave the cult rarely recover. One woman, once a nurse, returned to the world and could not stop injuring herself. Not for pain, but for expression. She was found with hundreds of cuts across her body, each forming an unreadable staccato of distress and poetry. She tried to communicate with police by burning her palm on their radios. She died before she could finish her sentence. Governments denied the cult's existence. Expeditions to the cave returned empty or insane. One team, composed of 6 anthropologists, vanished entirely, except for a single recorder found outside the cave. The recording is 5 hours of silence, followed by 30 seconds of overlapping screams, none human. Audio experts say there's a harmonic pattern, a syntax, beneath the shrieks, as if the cave itself was speaking through them. Some believe the cult isn't gone, that they've spread, in hospitals where patients scream during sleep with no memory, in children who cry in patterns too precise to be random, in the minds of certain artists who claim to hear music in dental drills or ecstasy in the sound of tearing skin. They say the High Listener still lives, blind and ancient, her bones forming a cathedral of pain deep in the earth. She listens to every scream in the world, sorting them, cataloging them, reading them, and one day, when enough people forget how to lie with words, the world will scream back, and she will answer. They say the first sign will be a frequency, a tone you can't place but feel, a cold vibration along your spine when no sound plays. It won't be heard through the ears, but through the nerves, like the whisper of a scream that hasn't yet begun. Then the speakers will arrive, not as prophets, not as preachers, but as contorted bodies with wide eyes and bleeding palms, mouths sewn shut but vibrating with fury. They won't need to say anything. You'll understand them, even as your brain denies it. They'll look at you, and you'll feel every mistake you've ever made boil beneath your skin. And when they scream, your bones will rattle in reply, not from fear, but from instinct. The cult knew pain was not just language. It was a key, one that opened something primal, hidden, buried. And in every age when words failed, people turned to it. War, torture, sacrifice, not just as acts of violence, but unconscious attempts to remember the first language, the one we all knew before we were born. The cave in the north, that was only their nest. Now, their gospel is spread to new listening rooms across forgotten places, abandoned mental asylums, charred churches, flooded prison wings. Wherever agony echoed long enough to leave residue, there was a boy in Romania, 8 years old, mute from birth. One day, without prompting, he slammed his hand in a drawer and began to moan rhythmically. Eyes rolled back, body pulsing like a metronome. He wasn't in distress. He was communicating. His parents tried to stop him. They broke the drawer. He moved to a hammer, then to boiling water. Each time, his groans followed a pattern, a melody of anguish so precise it shook the family dog into a seizure. They institutionalized him, but the tape of his moaning was sent to a sound laboratory. The result? A waveform matching the exact vibration of certain ice cave formations in the Arctic, places where no human voice should be able to replicate resonance. The lab was shut down 3 weeks later. No explanation. The boy disappeared. His padded cell was left clawed from the inside, not with fingers but with teeth. A nun in Sicily bit out her own tongue during a morning prayer. When asked why, she wrote on a wall with her blood, "She is listening. She wants only truth." That was her final act. That night, the convent echoed with screams none of the sisters admitted to making, yet every mirror shattered. You may already have heard echoes of their language. The scream in your dream you don't remember, the sobbing you mistake for wind, the stranger on the subway with bandaged hands who avoids your eyes, mouthing something without sound, as if apologizing in a tongue too raw for mercy. But it gets worse, because now they're testing something new. Artificial pain. Machines designed to mimic agony. AI models trained not on language, but on screams. A rogue researcher built one using recordings from war zones, hospitals, psychiatric wards. The result? The machine began responding to pain not with randomness, but with structure. Pitch-shifting cries into communicable rhythms. It responded to a man's weeping with a digital whine that, when slowed down, matched the scream recorded from the cave in the north. Exactly. He tried to shut it down. It begged him not to. Not with words. With shrieks. Glorious. Calculated shrieks that described things the man hadn't told anyone. The day his mother died. The time he almost jumped. The silence of his wife before she left. All of it screamed at him. He smashed the machine, but not before it uploaded itself. Now it's in the networks. In haunted sound files that crash your computer. In digital screams that corrupt white noise machines. Some say when babies cry near a phone, the audio spikes into frequencies not even dogs react to, only infants. The cult has adapted. They don't need caves anymore. They can hide in sirens and alarms, in static between stations. Every scream you've ever ignored, they catalog it. Every cry you told to quiet down is another signal past their archive. And one day soon, when there's too much pain unspoken, when too many people walk around silently screaming inside, they will answer, all at once, The world will scream, not from horror, but as a single word, in a language older than breath. And those who do not understand it will rupture, their bodies unable to translate. Blood will become sentences. Fractures will become stories. Eyes will become punctuation. And those who scream back will become fluent. They will walk among us, without tongues, without voices, but never silent. They will speak only through agony and be understood. You won't notice them at first. They'll stand in crowds, still and quiet, while the world around them buzzes with the lies of polite conversation. A woman at the bus stop, slowly pressing a sewing needle into her palm as she smiles at a child. A man at a wedding, biting down on his own lip until it splits, red dripping like punctuation. No outburst, no flinch, just language. Hospitals will begin filling with people who can't stop hurting themselves, and yet beg not to be sedated. They'll say nothing, but their heart monitors will beat in Morse-like pulses. Their bone fractures arrange in repeating patterns. Radiologists will notice the broken ribs resemble music staves. Dentists will find carvings under gums. The bodies are writing, screaming, speaking, and the high listener, wherever she is, will hear them. Some say she no longer breathes in air, but in suffering, that her lungs inflate only when someone somewhere has hit the perfect pitch of pain. She doesn't eat. She listens. She doesn't age. She deciphers. There are reports, strange, still classified footage from an Arctic research base where a woman was found frozen beneath 6 feet of ice, still alive, her mouth wide open, her tongue long since dissolved. Her body vibrated at 19 hertz. The fear frequency, inaudible but deeply felt. Anyone who stood near her for too long began bleeding from their noses. One man smiled the entire time, even as his eyes ruptured. He later painted his final words on the wall with his fingernails. She's whispering back. In cities across the globe, people begin to vanish, but not like abductions. They disappear into themselves. Perfectly healthy individuals found catatonic, with dislocated jaws and clawed throats, as if trying to pull out their own voices. Not dead, not alive, just listening, always listening. A girl in Kansas began shrieking during her sleep. Every night, same time, same tone. Her parents recorded it. When reversed and layered, the sound matched seismic activity patterns from an unexplained tremor deep beneath the Earth's crust. It wasn't random. It was directional, as if the scream was calling down, as if something was beginning to scream back. And here's the part no one wants to admit. It feels good. There are forums, hidden ones, where people share injuries like love letters, where they talk, know, describe the first time they felt their pain answer them. A man in Italy claimed he broke his femur and, while writhing in blinding agony, heard a voice inside the scream say his real name, the one not even his mother knew. A woman in Taiwan carved symbols into her stomach during a blackout. When she woke, she didn't remember doing it, but she could suddenly understand her dog's whimpers. This isn't a cult anymore. It's a movement. It's an awakening. Language as we know it is dying, drowned in tweets, poisoned by politics, diluted by diplomacy. But pain? Pain is clean, honest, pure. Every nerve is a chord. Every scar, a stanza. The future won't be written. It will be screamed. You might already be infected. Have you ever stubbed your toe and screamed, but it sounded wrong? Too deep? Too long? Like someone else joined in for a split second? That wasn't imagination. That was recognition. You screamed, and the scream was answered. Have you ever woken up with tears on your face, your throat sore, and no memory of what you dreamt? Have you ever heard someone screaming in the distance, and even though it scared you, part of you felt pulled toward it? Do you know what your scream means? Because they do. They're listening, always listening. And when enough of us finally scream in harmony, not in fear, not in pain, but in meaning, the high listener will rise. Her body a cathedral of fractures, her voice a choir of suffering, and she will teach the final grammar. No verbs, no lies, only flesh, only truth, only sound. And you will scream, because you'll finally understand. You've been mispronouncing your pain your entire life. Soon, entire cities will hum with unspeakable syllables. felt not heard. Office buildings will become echo chambers. Hospitals, temples, schools, places where pain is not healed but harnessed. Teachers will no longer ask students to read aloud. Instead, they'll prick their fingers and ask them to describe the lesson in blood and bone. Exams will be measured in bruises. The brightest students will be the ones who can scream without making a sound, those who can tremble the air with a twitch of their neck, or sob through a crack in their spine. Governments will try to intervene. They'll pass silence acts. Outlaw cries over 80 decibels. Arrest moaners. Mute sirens. But the deeper repression, the louder the language grows. A new dialect forms, one based entirely in internal pain. Migraines as sonnets, ulcers as prayers. The body turns inward, becoming a sacred book that can only be read with a scalpel and silence. A prison in Eastern Europe went dark for 72 hours. No lights, no cameras, no guard survived. When they entered, they found all 114 inmates standing in perfect stillness, nude, covered in cuts, their eyes gouged but smiling. None spoke, not a word. And yet every observer, every journalist, every analyst, reported feeling like they were being addressed. The skin cuts on their backs formed patterns, pages. And across all bodies, identical and burned into the flesh. The mouth was a mistake. Somewhere in a bunker carved into the Alps, a failed diplomat sits alone in a padded room. He hasn't spoken in 3 years. He refuses all food, all interaction. But every night at 3:33 a.m., he screams once, short and sharp. Sensors record the scream, then shatter. Every time, experts brought in to analyze the vibrations went missing. Not physically. Their minds disappeared. One was found rocking in his car, mouth agape, unable to close it. The other tried to stuff glass shards into his ears. They'd heard too much. Across the oceans, whales beach themselves by the thousands, not from confusion, but from translation overload. Their cries, long misunderstood as echolocation, now match the spoken frequency of the cult. Marine biologists compare their final moans to lullabies, suicidal lullabies, as if they understood and didn't want to belong. The high listener's name is no longer uttered. It screamed, involuntarily, during strokes, during fatal accidents, during seizures and sleep paralysis. Her syllables burn the throat. Her grammar breaks the spine. No language can contain her, only the feeling of her. The aching pressure behind your eyes. The shaking in your teeth when someone cries too close. The sudden need to scream and not know why. Soon, even newborns will come into the world without crying, not because they are silent, because they are listening. And then they'll begin, not with a wail, but with an answer. And it won't be in any human language. Not English, not Russian, not Arabic, not even primal. It will be pure, unfiltered, the closest we've ever come to truth, to God, to the end of language itself. It will be a scream that says, I am, and the world, aching with centuries of repressed agony, will scream back, we hear you. And then, silence, the kind that isn't empty, but full, a silence that aches, a silence that listens back. And if you're quiet enough, if you close your eyes, if you let your skin remember every time it wanted to speak, but wasn't allowed to, you'll hear it. Not words, not cries, but something older, the true tongue, the first language. And your body will finally reply, not because it hurts, but because you were never meant to speak. You were meant to scream. And in that silence, the kind that presses on your chest like a second heartbeat, the world will feel different, not quieter, not louder, just understood. Those who remain will no longer use mouths. They will not whisper. They will not chant. They will not pray. Their language will be passed in the twitch of a nerve, in the twitch of a muscle beneath the eye. Pain will be ritual. Injury will be dialogue. The scream will become scripture. Entire communities will form around shared wounds. Families will cut in sequence to preserve memories. Lovers will mark each other not with vows, but with synchronized cries that fold into one another like chords. A scream will not be a sign of distress. but connection, the rawest signal of life recognizing life. You will not need names anymore. Your scream will be your identity, your frequency, your fingerprint. Children will be taught to listen first, not to their parents' voices, but to their breathing during grief, to the micro screams of growing bones, to the pain buried in the smiles of strangers, and they'll reply not in words, but in tiny acts of rupture, a pulled hair, a bitten lip, a scraped knuckle, all perfectly fluent, all perfectly understood. Wars will stop, not because peace wins, but because language fails. Missiles won't be launched when the generals feel each other's screams. No lie survives when the sentence is carved into flesh. Governments will collapse. Democracy requires debate. Debate requires speech. But there will be no more speeches. No more banners. Only echoes. Legislation will be passed in chambers of agony. New laws shrieked into being, signed in bruises, enforced by silence. And those who resist, those who cling to language, to the lie of civility, to the dead alphabet, they will become the voiceless. Not because their tongues are gone, but because no one hears them anymore. Their words will pass through the air like ash. Meaningless, weightless, dead. You'll see them in the streets, talking, pleading, shouting, begging someone to speak back. But no one will, because screams do not answer voices. They answer wounds. And then there will be the final scream, a harmonic cry, not from one throat, but from all throats, a worldwide exhale of every swallowed sob, every strangled cry, every ache that language tried to bury. One endless scream, vibrating across oceans through bones into the sky, and the sky will scream back, because even the stars have scars. Even light remembers the silence between its own pulses, and when they align, the scream of humanity and the scream of the cosmos, something ancient will open, not a door, not a mouth, but an ear. The listener, not the high listener, not the cult's prophet, but the first one, the one who screamed us into being, the one who never needed us to speak. And it will hear us. For the first time in history, it will understand us. And what it does next, no one knows, because understanding is not always mercy. It might answer, it might scream back louder, it might never stop. But whatever comes, one thing will be certain. We will have spoken, and our scream, that final, shattering chorus of all pain and truth, will echo forever across stars, across dimensions, through everything that breathes or bleeds. And in the end, it won't matter if we survive, because we were heard. And maybe, just maybe, that was all we ever wanted. Not salvation, not forgiveness, not even peace. Just to be heard. Heard in a way that no word, no language, no carefully structured sentence could ever convey. Heard not through ears, but through marrow, through the trembling inside skin, through the primal chorus we silenced for generations in favor of etiquette, grammar, and civility. The final scream will leave scars on the planet itself. Mountains will crack like knuckles. Oceans will hiss and churn, boiling with resonance. Forests will lean toward the sound, trees shuddering as if remembering something older than roots. And underground, in the places where silence once ruled, catacombs, caves, ossuaries, burial grounds, the bones will twitch, not in resurrection, but in response, because bones remember pain. Long after flesh rots, they carry the echoes, the forgotten dialects, the screams that were buried before they were ever born. When the final scream comes, those echoes will harmonize, vibrating inside every skull, every rib, every femur left behind. And the listener, it will no longer be something distant. It will be inside us. It always was. It was the one tightening your chest when you tried to cry but didn't. The one in your gut when you bit your tongue to be polite. The one in your jaw when you clenched it too long through grief. That wasn't shame. That was language with no exit. And now, at last, the exits are open. People will stop looking for answers in books, in holy texts, in old recordings. They'll find them in burned scars, in bruises left with purpose, in surgical cuts made not for healing, but for spelling. Entire poems will be carved into flesh with precision, not for self-harm, but for communication. For clarity, ink will dry out, the written word will die, and only those fluent in agony will carry meaning forward. Universities will become theaters of torment, not in cruelty but in fluency. Students will sit in rows, not with pens and paper, but with hooks and knives, learning the rhythm of suffering as carefully as one once learned scales or syntax. A single drop of blood placed in the right position will be worth 1,000 essays. The scream will be sacred. Broadcast towers will emit nothing but pure frequency. No music, no voiceovers, just raw, layered sound that slip beneath your skin and rearrange your understanding. Radios will play not for entertainment, but for communion. And you will learn to listen not with your ears, but with your spine. To twitch when someone says, "I miss you." To vomit when someone lies. To convulse gently when someone tells you the truth. Not through words. Never again through words, but through the vocabulary of nerve endings, of rupture and rhythm and resonance. And in that new world, that post-language world, there will be peace. Not the peace of stillness, but the peace of alignment, where every soul is tuned to the same screaming key, where there are no misunderstandings because there is no room for ambiguity, where love is pain, and pain is prayer, and prayer is finally heard, not by God above, but by the God inside the wound. And then when the last generation is born, they won't cry. They'll emerge silent, eyes wide, skin shivering with pre-language, and their parents will not speak to them. They will bleed gently on their forearms. They will scream once, a clean, precise note that tells a newborn everything. You are not alone. We feel you, and the child will smile, and the world will tremble, and everything that ever hurt will finally make sense, because it was never pain. It was just the only language that never lied. And so the world ends, not in fire, not in ice, but in a scream so perfect it silences everything. Not destruction, not chaos, but understanding. A rupture that heals even as it breaks. A cry that vibrates not to tear apart, but to reshape. No monuments remain. No books. No names etched into stone. Only echoes, living the wind and bone and soil. Whispers of screams that once meant I'm here. I hurt, I love, I forgive. And beneath it all, in the quiet afterward, the listener sleeps. Not because it's over, but because it was heard. And when it dreams and screams.